I'm sure it varies very much from court to court, and I volunteer at both the Royal Courts of Justice and the Central Family Court, and there are some quite clear differences between the two. For me, the variety of a day with support through court is really the hallmark. If you're in the Royal Courts of Justice, it's a bit more solemn, it's a bit more kind of serene and quiet. And of course, the offices of STC are much bigger in support through court. So you don't get quite the, perhaps often the sort of frenetic sense that you get at the Central Family Court. The other reason for the difference between the two is in the Central Family Court, you are obviously dealing with family cases, and a lot of them are children cases, which generate a lot of emotion and anxiety. And although you get that in the RCJ as well, given particularly the smaller space in the Central Family Court, the atmosphere there is often a bit more charged, a bit more emotional because of the nature of the cases, the fact that people are closer together. But in the days when we were able to go to the courts, I loved it, the routine. I come up from Sevenoaks in Kent, so always try and arrive in good time so that you're there before the rush starts, and great to see who's on for the day, have the opportunity to catch up with volunteers, catch up with the members of staff, see what court hearings are going on. You may be whisk yourself off very quickly to a court hearing, either within the Thomas More building or some other part of the Royal Courts of Justice, or obviously in the Central Family Court and some of the outlying courts and tribunals that we cover from there. Or you spend your time initially in the office. Again, in the RCJ, you may be on the reception because somebody has to operate the reception and see people in. We don't have somebody doing that all day at the Central Family Court. And then it's diving in to see people, and it's that huge variety and getting an opportunity to talk to people and see what their issues are, give them time to settle, get what documents they've got out, which are often not in a good order or arranged in a way that makes it easy to see what the issues are. So you learn over time not to be too impatient, that you have to spend time with people to understand what their issues are and see the ways in which you can help them and work through. And you get, for no particular reason, surges. Sometimes it's really busy at the beginning of the day with lots of people arriving. Sometimes it takes time to build up. Again, in the family court, it seems to always tend to be very busy early in the day. The RCJ, it varies. Quite often you get a rush of people around lunchtime, and then again sort of late in the afternoon. Sometimes you get a lot of people coming in, so there's no particular rhyme or reason. And of course, if you're not busy with a client, there's usually some admin to do, some notes to write up, and that sort of thing, and again, chance to catch up with people, maybe help somebody with some issue or get some help from somebody else on an issue that you might be dealing with. I think this was the first thing that really, one of the first things that struck me when I started volunteering was, we all probably have this sense, I mean, I was a lawyer by training, so I kind of know what goes on in court, but we all sort of have this sense that really what a court should be is an opportunity for somebody to go in front of a judge, tell their story, and explain where they are, what their issues are, and with as little formality as possible, be able to get across their case and for the judge to be able to finally make a decision on the case. Of course, that isn't what happens, because the courts are, the best will in the world, very formal places, and have very defined structures to the way in which cases have to be presented. And the biggest challenge for litigants in person who haven't had the experience of the courts before is actually dealing with that formality and realizing that you can't simply wander into court on the day allotted and tell your story. There has to be all sorts of build-up, all sorts of preparation. Evidence is given in a particular way, and so on and so forth. And litigants in person do face real practical difficulties in getting themselves ready to put across their case in the best possible way. And obviously that's one of the key things that we do, whether it's actually going with them to court to be with them in that process, or whether it's in the build up to that. It is so essential. I mean, what I always say to people is, look, let's just take a bit of time when you go into court, have your list of key points that you want to make. It's so easy to forget something terribly important that you want to say, and if you haven't got your key points lined up and you haven't got your documents that you're going to need to show to the judge ready, judges are only human, and if they don't get the point quite quickly that you're trying to make, it's likely to get lost as the case develops. So the people do face real practical challenges, and the courts face real practical challenges in helping litigants in person, particularly with these barriers that there are to getting your case across because of the way that it has to be prepared and presented. So that's also how we help people in court. I mean, is there any great advantage to us being there? Because we can't speak to the judge, we're not representing people. And sometimes you're itching to be able to say something to the court because you feel you can perhaps get it across in a way that the court will understand it, but you can't do that. But even without being able to do that, I think the advantage that a litigant person has with one of us sitting beside them, if that's what we're able to do in the physical court session, is partly that they're not alone. They've got somebody there who is, as it were, on their side or with them. It's partly, obviously, that we can take notes so that afterwards we can debrief and explain what has happened and see what next steps might need to be taken, depending on what the outcome of the case may be. We may be able to help with passing notes of little points that have been talked about before that haven't come out in whatever way they should. We may be able to quietly interpret what the judge is asking for and that sort of thing. And so, generally speaking, I think people benefit a lot from having somebody there. If it's not us, it might be a Mackenzie friend, as they're called, or some other friend who goes with them. But because we've got the experience of seeing these cases on a regular basis, I think we can really help people. Now, that's what we were doing before the lockdown. Obviously, what we've been doing since the lockdown is largely working through the national helpline, and that's a very different experience. Obviously, what we've been doing since the lockdown is largely working through the national helpline, and that's a very different experience for us and obviously for the clients as well. The practical challenges that we see now that clients are facing with court cases in the COVID-19 era is simply understanding how to progress their case. And of course, they try and call, they try and telephone a court if they've got enough patience to hang on to wait for the call to be answered. They're not going to get advice on how to present their case because the court staff aren't able to do that. They have to stay neutral. And very often the reason they call us is simply because when they do finally get through to the court, they're given our phone number as a place to go to get some assistance with preparing. And of course, it does expose people's ability to handle online communications, to make use of laptops and iPads and so forth in order to search for forms, to find ways of preparing things. And instead of being able to sit down with us beside them to run through a form, we're having to do it online. So I think we've been learning about how we can help people through the phone line. And I found after doing it for a few weeks, although probably on balance, I do still like the face-to-face contact with clients, you do feel you can really help people often through the helpline. And in some ways, you're there, you've got access to all the online help that Support Through Court give us in terms of where we can signpost people, where we can find forms, where we can find guidance and so forth. And I found that it works pretty well with the great majority of people. I am conscious that there are people who either are not calling because they don't feel comfortable with using the phone line or with using a computer. So we're missing people there who are not perhaps able to interact with us through that medium. But by and large, people are, and we are finding ways of helping people, I think, through the helpline. And I found it really interesting having this national helpline because, in a sense, when we go to court, when we go and base ourselves in the courts, it's quite a sort of parochial experience. You're just dealing with the one court, the one location. Now with the helpline, you're speaking to people all over the country, and I find that really energizing and interesting to see, obviously, that the same problems are cropping up in all parts of the country. But I think it's helping us with our profile, having a national helpline. It will definitely, I imagine, be a strong part of the scene going forward, because for many people it's going to be a much quicker and easier way of accessing us than having to come to court. And we'll have to have the balance between the two as time goes on. So I think it's a really good thing, and I think we've been given a lot of training, and every week there are more updates, and it's very useful having the WhatsApp groups of the volunteers where people can share experiences and thoughts and anxieties and concerns, and get answers to questions and so forth. So all that is working, I think, as well as could be expected in the short period of time it's all had to be up and running. It is interesting, the type of cases that certainly I've been getting on the helpline, and I think it's most people's experience. They are almost all, probably 90% or more, family cases, and of those, the great majority are about children and access to children, child arrangements. They seem to be the constant theme through the helpline. We are getting some other cases as well, and some money cases and so forth, but given that a lot of other types of litigation is kind of on hold because evictions are not taking place, and landlords are not taking action, banks are not taking actions, and so on and so forth. I suspect that the volume of non-family litigation is quite low at present compared to the normal level, and in consequence perhaps we're not seeing as many of those cases as we normally would. And I think the lockdown has probably created a lot of additional tension within family units and ex-family units over arrangements for children and the like, which has generated, unfortunately, a great deal of anxiety and problems.